This is going to sound like so much hate, and I swear it's not. Welcome back to the Warner Brothers podcast. I'm Kyle, joined by Tim Gray. Tim, what's up? How you doing?
Doing really well. It's been a minute, actually. Haven't been on. It's been a little bit of basketball lately on the pod. I've been listening, but here we are, ready to talk some football.
For sure, yeah. It's been about 2 weeks since you and I recorded, and then Keenan and I recorded last Monday, and it honestly feels like 3 weeks for both. Like, I feel like I have not recorded in forever, so I'm glad to be back. We're actually doing a doubleheader, Tim and myself, so it's me and Tim right now. After this, and this won't really matter once you guys listen to this episode, but Keenan and Brandon will be joining us for a second episode in about an hour. So me and Tim are kind of under a time constraint, and who knows, maybe Keenan and Brandon will just join the studio right at the end of this podcast. So we'll see. We'll see what happens. But Tim and I are going to talk some free agent quarterbacks and maybe some offseason storylines if we get to it. But we're going to try to play QB matchmaker with these free agent quarterbacks, maybe some trade candidates, maybe some quarterbacks that you don't even know if they're available or not. Maybe we decide they're available. Who knows? But we got some teams. We got some quarterbacks. Tim, what are your thoughts on the offseason so far? It's only been about 3 weeks. Anything caught your eye?
Not necessarily. I mean, a couple offseason moves, like we had talked prior to the pod, the potential bid to ban the tush push. We saw that, and we saw that the Packers were the one team that came out saying that they wanted it banned. I don't know if it gets banned. I really don't. If only one team is submitting concern for it, unless they start getting other teams to stepping in and back it, I don't think it goes anywhere.
That's really interesting. It's really interesting because it was brought up last offseason. It might even been brought up the last 2 off seasons. And it's a dominant play, but still Philly seems to have way more success than any other team, right? We do see it get stopped with other teams. Even the Bills, Bills have a tough time running it, and Josh Allen's a pretty, a bigger size quarterback than your average quarterback. So I can understand it if it was turned down just for that reason, because it does seem to be just Philly that seems to have this advantage. I do wonder, I don't know, it doesn't make sense to me that you can push on offense, but the defense isn't allowed to kind of freight train their defensive lineman or any position player. So I do wonder if maybe they would allow that. Obviously, you'd probably get injuries. Honestly, so far, the tush push hasn't really created any injuries on the offensive end. So, yeah, I don't know. I do think one day we'll see it banned. I agree with you, though. I don't know if it's this offseason. And then I sent you that link that said, looks like, we famously talked about the whole Josh Allen play and I think the Dalton Kincaid play before that led to this controversy. But apparently there's going to be no more chain gang. There's going to be, what is it? Is it a chip inside the ball? I think they already have a chip inside the ball, but they're going to something to do with, let me get this right. Let me get this right here.
They definitely just said electronic chain gang, basically, is what it is.
So essentially what we see on TV, I would assume, right?
Exactly.
With the yellow on TV. Let's see. Yeah, electrical measurement for first down starting this year. Okay, so I assume it'll be similar to something we see. I don't really know what that means by electrical measurement. Seems long overdue, but also the chain gang seemed pretty successful. Granted, you're kind of just going by, you're kind of just pointing it out and going by what you think by the eye. If you're a ref here, an older ref in all these refs cases, but it seemed pretty successful, except for cases like the Josh Allen play where they just straight up did not use it. So really interesting. Are you glad to see this?
I am. I know I've definitely talked about this specifically for the last few years. There's always been 1 or 2 plays that stand out throughout the year that kind of bring up the argument of why can't we just put a chip in the ball? Mm-hmm. I remember seeing immediately after the Chiefs-Bills game the next day, there was an article posted saying oh, it's not that easy. Guess what? We could put a rocket on the moon. We can definitely put a chip in a ball to determine where it is.
I would say so.
It's not that hard. They could do it. So they're going to figure it out. Hopefully it's good. Hopefully it doesn't cause more controversy like it did when they made pass interference reviewable. Hopefully we don't get some sort of fiasco like that. Hopefully it just makes the game better because in theory it will. We will know if you got a first down or not. That's what we're hoping for.
Two responses to that. Number one, microchip. One thing I did see following that Bills Chiefs game, I remember, forget where it was, and granted, this is just the internet, but someone had said they put chips in the ball after last offseason. Like that's already been a thing that maybe the NFL offices in New York City have access to, but not necessarily, obviously the public. So it might be a thing that's already been in place, I guess. And then again, who knows what this electrical chain gang will look like. But on top of that, I don't know if you've seen this, but the MLB seems to be experimenting with no umpires and just electronic strike zones or AI strike zones or something of that. So it'll be interesting if all sports move in that direction. Because I would imagine, especially something as subjective as balls and strikes in baseball, if you can just eliminate the umpire position, which is, obviously omnipresent all over baseball, what does that mean for football? A sport that has a ton of judgment calls at full speed, right? What does that mean for the NBA? What does that mean for soccer or any other sport? So very interesting stuff. Very interesting stuff. Do you want to get right into these QBs, or is there any other off-season storylines that catch your attention?
Those are the only two that are coming to mind. So I'm good to get right
Likewise.
into QBs and play a game.
Yeah, let's do it. Let's do it. Let's play a little matchmaker for these teams. So what I'll do, Tim, I'm gonna name a team, and you can tell me one. I don't care if you give me 10 quarterbacks. You give me all the quarterbacks you think could go there, or if you, especially if you got one in mind for sure that you're like, nah, they definitely going there. Or I'd love to see them go there. Maybe they stay there. You tell me. All right. Let's start with the Las Vegas Raiders, Tim. Who could you see being their next quarterback, or who do you think will be their next quarterback?
I could see two people being the
Okay.
quarterback of this team. I could technically see three, but the two that come to mind, one is Justin Fields. I think they don't have a lot of talent, and he is a
There
talented
we go.
QB. So if he can come in there and give them some sort of rushing upside, that might propel them forward potentially. So I could see that working. But another one I could see is a little reunion between Pete Carroll and Russell Wilson. I
Very
don't think
interesting.
anybody's I don't think anybody's been saying that at all this offseason. I think Russ is going to say take as much money as he can, and I don't think he's going to be opposed to going back to Pete Carroll and running it back a year or two. So I could see that. Right now I have Russell Wilson as the Las Vegas Raiders quarterback.
It's very interesting, and I like both of those, especially Fields, because I definitely have not thought about Fields for the Raiders. But he makes sense because I mean, he would. They've got players on both sides of the ball, and he just gives you a different dynamic. You know what I mean? And he's you talk about someone like Anthony Richardson, who's explosive as hell, but really can't throw. Maybe he can throw the deep ball here and there. And Fields at least is more far along as far as progress than Anthony Richardson for sure. So he's a little bit of a better quarterback. Obviously, went what 4-1 this year with the Steelers, 3-1, 4-1. So there's something there. And yeah, the rate. I mean, why not take a shot on someone if you're not going with AOC, if you're not going with Aiden O'Connell? Why not go with Fields? Um, Russell Wilson is very interesting. The reunion with Pete Carroll, veteran quarterback. Uh, so to me, I could see them sticking with O'Connell because he really didn't play too bad down the stretch. He's not explosive, obviously, but he doesn't hurt you either, right? So he's somewhere between a backup and a bridge QB, and he's young enough to where who knows, right? Um, to me, this is an Aaron Rodgers spot because he said he wants to go somewhere that wants him. He said he wants him to be about winning, and he said he wants preferably maybe some warm weather. Okay, we know Vegas is warm weather. Uh, and I do think Tom Brady's going to have a say in the quarterback. Like, I think they'll kind of like lean towards what he wants at QB, even though he's just a minority owner. Um, I could see it being Rodgers. But then when you say Russell Wilson, well, hey, that's a veteran QB that comes with less drama. than Aaron Rodgers, right? In theory. Uh, but I don't know. I could see Rodgers making it work with Pete, but they're still kind of like in the middle there. They could be competitive. They could be, they're a building team. So Russell Wilson makes a lot of sense. I like that better than Aaron Rodgers in that sense. Especially that's a place he could go and start immediately. You know what I mean? Especially if you're competing with AOC. Um, so I like that. That's very interesting to me. Um, I have another quarterback for them, but we're going to circle back. I'm not going to go there yet. All right. So I'm going to give you another team here from the AFC North. They are the Cleveland Browns. They have what? They the two or they're the third pick, right? They the second or third? Second pick. Okay. So I mean, they could take a QB, obviously. There. What do you think? How do you think they go? Do they go veteran QB or do they go draft QB or do they go trade?
I made this, I guess it's technically a bold call, but I had made this a couple weeks ago when Keenan was on. I think Sam Darnold is a Cleveland Brown. I think they view him as a bridge QB. They'll sign him for a 1 or 2 year deal. He gets an offensive minded coach with Stefanski, so that's good for him. And then if they want to roll with Watson in the future, they can do it potentially later on down the road.
If they do.
I don't. Yeah, exactly. They might just say no thanks and just pay him the money and let him walk. I think this year, if they're going to move Garrett, if they do, which I don't think they do, but if they do, they're not taking a quarterback at 2. They're taking Abdul Carter at 2. And that makes me think they're signing a QB. They're not drafting one. And they'll get Sam Darnold. Maybe it works. I mean, it very well could work with an offensive mind. Now, the problem with Darnold is when he's under pressure, he's not very good. And the Browns had a big issue with pressure last year. He was like the most sacked QB while he was playing, Watson was. So if they can fix that, they sign Darnold. It'll work for a year. Maybe it keeps Stefanski's job alive, and then they go on from the future.
So you think Darnold as a bridge QB, not as a long-term option? So we're talking like a 2-year deal here?
I think they give him a 2-year deal. If he plays really well this year and Watson's healthy the next year, they stick with Darnold, and then maybe that turns into a long-term thing. But if they want to get him on a 2-year deal where it's like heavily front-loaded, they could cut him for $5 million dead cap at the end, something like that. I could see that happening.
See, the Browns are probably the weirdest team on this list that I have. Only because they got the second pick, right? And you got a former coach of the year, a recent coach of the year, and Kevin Stefanski, right? Like definitely the best head coach the Browns have had in decades, probably. Okay, and it seems like all right. Let's say the Browns go 5-12. All right, could be hot seat for Kevin Stefanski, could be over for Kevin Stefanski. Difference is though, if that's Darnold, or if that's I won't say Darnold because he's an interesting case, but if that's a Kirk Cousins, let's say, or if that's a Aaron Rodgers even, and they go 5-12, that seems like a firing. If it's Cam Ward or Shador and you're 5-12, does that make a difference? You know what I mean? So that's why it all depends on where the Browns are. If they're wanting to compete, they still feel like they have a at least playoff caliber roster here, or if they feel like they're in a bridge year. So I could see them going a multitude of directions. Obviously, I wouldn't have a problem with them bringing Jameis Winston back personally. He's a veteran guy. He can win you games. He can obviously lose you games as well. But I would almost play it safe. I wouldn't mind them taking a QB. Thing is, as we've talked about, like this QB draft, most people would say it's weak. So I mean, would you trade out of that spot? Would you want a veteran QB? Do you think you can get into the playoffs next year? Because in that case, if you got offensive line help, you got enough talent on your offensive side of the ball to where maybe Darnold's not that bad. You got an offensive mind there in Stefanski. So they're the biggest question mark to me, honestly, as a team. I will be more interested in them than any other team. And that includes the next team that we're going to talk about that I think has some aspirations. But the Browns, man, their team's talented enough, but yet so far away because of this whole Deshaun Watson situation. So, yeah, if you told me Kirk Cousins, if you told me Aaron Rodgers, if you told me Sam Darnold, if you told me literally, 15 to 20 QBs, whether they're backups starting in the league right now, a rookie, I'd believe it for them and I could see it for them. It's just a matter of what their actual direction is. Um, but yeah, I mean, if it were me, I would go with someone like Jameis. And if you could trade even for a guy, maybe like, I don't know, maybe even Jimmy G. I wouldn't mind Jimmy G for them either. I could see that as well. Um, yeah, I actually like Jimmy G for the Browns. Let's go to the Steelers, though. How do you feel about them? Could you actually, before you give your answer, could you see any world where they re-sign one of Justin Fields or Russell Wilson?
Could definitely see that. And in fact, I have Justin Fields re-signing with Pittsburgh. That's what I think they'll do.
Okay.
Um, I think, like you said, they were 4-1 with him. You get him a good coach that makes him play competently. Doesn't need to air it out at all. They can just play the football that the Steelers are known to play, and they could win double-digit games with him. So I think they're going to stick with him. They're going to let Russ walk, and they'll take Fields. I think they'll probably get him on a cheaper deal, just because he didn't play a whole lot last year. I think Fields really opens up their playbook more than Russ does, so I think that that's intriguing to them because they've been a team that offense has kind of let them down year in, year out, every single year lately. So hopefully they can live up to the expectations with a mobile quarterback like the Baltimore Ravens do. Even if they get 60% of Lamar Jackson, that would be a major upgrade for the Steelers.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I loved when they got both of those QBs on the cheap last year, right? Because it's like you get what you get, and they got big success really out of both. Again, you got one loss out of Fields, then Russ got you into the playoffs for probably at least a month, if not more, of the season. They were the one seed in leading in the AFC North. Uh, I look at it a different way, though. I get Russ is on the downside of his career, but again, he had you at the one seed for at one point late in the season. I think even early December they were the one seed. Um, I could see a world if they built more at the wide receiver position and the tight end position and all the skill positions. If you round that out, why not keep going with Russ? If you got to I think it was 11 wins last year, 10 or 11, 10, solid 10. So I mean, Russ got you to a good spot, and he was really playing well, probably up until the last 4 or 5 weeks of the season. And they had that stretch where it was like, what? I think they and the Texans and the Ravens and the Chiefs, they all played, what, like 3 games in 10 days or something crazy like that.
Yep.
Obviously, it would be Russ that affects the most, being the oldest out of all of them. So I wouldn't mind them bringing either one of them back. And I thought Fields played really well for them, too, especially since Tomlin likes to be a ball control guy. I like Arthur Smith as their OC anyway, so he can be creative with the Justin Fields. So I wouldn't mind either one. The most intriguing, obviously, is Aaron Rodgers, and we talked about this a few weeks ago. There's some betting sites that had him as the betting favorite, or had the Steelers as the betting favorite to land Aaron Rodgers. I personally just can't see it. Like, I cannot envision Aaron Rodgers in a Steelers uniform. Um, but to me, honestly, bring back one of those two guys you had from last year, and I feel like they'd have some success. That's obviously the toughest division, if not one of the toughest divisions in football. It would be nice to see them really try to invest in that position. Really get a guy that can grow and build up. I mean, they tried it with Kenny Pickett, and it didn't work out. But it almost seems like they kind of play quarterback roulette now, year to year, especially after last year getting Fields and Russ, and then now not having either under contract. So they're super intriguing as well. Not as messy as the Browns, but super intriguing, especially when you factor in Tomlin and what his future could be after next year with the Steelers. Any other thoughts on the Pittsburgh Steelers?
I had one and then I completely blanked on it, so we're good to move on, I guess.
My fault. My fault. I was talking too much, I guess. Next, we got the New York Jets. What do you see in the cards for them as far as QB?
This one is one that honestly I didn't even make a prediction. Now that I'm thinking about it, they need a QB. This one's really tough. There's really not a lot of guys that I think are going to be like willing to go to New York. And like you said, this year's draft for QB is pretty weak. So I think the Jets get like a really bad situation where they just have a rotating door of backups that are just in there. So for now, I'll put Drew Lock there just because he's already in New York. They'll give him a cheap deal. He'll come in. Like I said, they don't really have, unless they go out and trade for somebody, they don't really have a lot of options here. Yes, there are a few guys, but I really don't think a lot of people are going to be willing to go to the Jets because there are better options out there. So I think they'll get a few guys like Drew Lock, Marcus Mariota, and
Hmm.
they'll play revolving door here for a bad year and put them back into the top for next year's draft class.
Interesting. So this is a spot where I could see Justin Fields landing as well. Like you said, their options are limited. They're in a forever rebuild, if we're being honest. But especially after last year losing Aaron Rodgers at QB, you're going to be in a rebuild. Um, Losing Devontae, there's a lot of. I mean, we heard it during the year that possibly Sam Darnold returns there. I don't think that's a recipe for success, honestly, especially if you are in a rebuild. Um, I could see them, doing whatever they do at the seventh pick, right, and then getting a QB that's young and promising, maybe in the second or third round. We've seen that work out for success plenty of times. So the Jets should kind of play it cool this year. Honestly, not try to do anything big at QB, especially since there's not, a ton available. Like there is, but it's not life changing necessarily, especially when you're in their position. So, I mean, again, they're kind of a weird team, much like the Browns, where they do have a really good defense. At one time, we would have said they're Super Bowl ready. And then they took a huge step back last year. The offense outside of Rodgers and Devontae Adams really didn't produce. You know, that's why people. I mean, we had this talk on here. There's a lot of people who lament Aaron Rodgers for a lot of their lack of success. I put it on coaching, but I mean, you know this. Brees Hall was going what number one, top five, even in a lot of these fantasy drafts, and he wasn't producing. He was not producing. He had a very disappointing year. Um, Struggled inside the five. Like he was not good in the red zone at all this year. So that's another team where I think they should play it cool. But this would be a Fields team for me, where he would just be fun. There would not be much expectations for him in New York. He could, have a pretty good running game with a hopefully rejuvenated Brees Hall if you're the New York Jets. So I would like to see Fields there, if not in Pittsburgh. Um, Next team I have for you is the Indianapolis Colts.
I think the Colts are just going to ride with Richardson. I could see a world where they re-sign Flacco and just keep him there as a backup. But to be completely honest, I think it's time that Flacco just retires. He's quite old, and we saw some pretty bad football from him last year. So I think he might be willing to just hang him up and just call it a career. Uh, I think they're going to roll with Richardson. I think that's going to be good and it's going to be bad. You're going to probably hear one of my bold takes later on surrounding that.
Interesting.
So I'll just ride with Richardson for this, and then whoever their backup is, if he has to come in and play, he plays. But if not, it's primarily Richardson this year.
So I think Anthony Richardson will be on the team. I just don't think he will be starting. Um, so now with full confidence, I could see an Aaron Rodgers, a Kirk Cousins. Uh, Fuck it, I'll throw this name out. I'll throw this name out because I think he's going to be available for a few teams that we're going to be talking about soon. Maybe Matthew Stafford. That's another name I was going to throw out for the Raiders that I was going to save for later. And I would throw him out. I'll just throw it out early. I could see him for your team as well. I could see it. That's what kind of started these rumors with Stafford and the Giants. So um, I could see if the Colts, I don't know, just want to get frisky. I mean, they had that run with Matt Ryan, with Phillip Rivers, where they were just, Carson Wentz, where they were just getting vet QB after vet QB, and they've had these competitive teams. Now it's been uh, Anthony Richardson. I think the year before was Minshew, right? When he got injured. And they've had success. I mean, they were a game essentially out of the playoffs this year, made the playoffs with Minshew the year before. Um, so there's still a ton of talent, and they're well coached, and they just cannot get over the hump. And Anthony Richardson, as we've said time and time again, is as raw as it gets. So I wouldn't mind them keeping Anthony Richardson for the long term. But man, he's got to learn how to throw, with anticipation and just throw it all, really. I mean, saying with anticipation is being nice because this guy, I think all he can do is throw a deep ball, it seems like. So uh, they're probably the next intriguing team to me after the Browns, just because they could go either way. They could just stay patient with Anthony Richardson, and they just don't seem like a patient team, what we've seen out of them, I'd say the last decade, or really since Andrew Luck. They've had all the pieces there where you can just be a successful team and, even be a sleeper in the playoffs. But How about you? Do you see a veteran quarterback? Could you see a world where the Colts end up with a vet?
Not necessarily. I think right now they've committed to Richardson. So I think I don't think many vets are going to come into there saying that Indianapolis is a place where I can go in and start. It's going to be competing for the starting job.
Mm,
So I think most vets will probably stay away.
okay.
You might get a backup like maybe Mac Jones goes there and we see him play because he has to, because Richardson can't stay healthy or, gets tired, takes himself out of a game again. Like plenty of different ways that we get a backup QB in there. I don't necessarily think it'll be like a veteran, but as veteran as Mac Jones gets, it'll be somebody like that.
Sure. Sure. All right, we're gonna stick with the AFC South here. What about the Tennessee Titans?
This is one of the most intriguing teams to me because it sounds like they're going to stick with Will Levis. Statistically, he wasn't great last year, but he wasn't bad. He wasn't terrible. He
Right.
did cost them many games, but statistically, his numbers are okay.
Sure.
At least the quarterback position was. Mason Rudolph came in later on and played, but um, they should move on from him. That should be the number one priority, is to get themselves a QB. So I have them taking Cam Ward and signing Jameis Winston, and that'll be their new QB room. And then Will Levis will move down to QB3 on the depth chart. Play it by like that. We get a veteran presence in there. Mason Rudolph, not quite the veteran you want in there, but Jameis at least has some experience, can at least teach a guy something. So I think we see two new QBs for them. Both of them might play. We have no idea, but I think they're definitely taking Cam Ward with the first overall pick.
That's interesting because Levis, who I don't love as a starting quarterback at all, I wouldn't mind him as a backup. Like that's an ideal backup, someone who can take chances, someone who can deliver the ball. You know what I mean? Obviously, he's going to take sacks and throw interceptions, but he's not afraid to take chances, which I'd rather that out of my backup than my starter be reckless. You know what I mean? That's the thing. I think their GM, or if they even have a GM, who the fuck knows? Maybe it was their owner. Someone came out and said like they want to take the best prospect available. And again, if you've heard any of these draft guys talk, it's not the QB that's the best guy available. So I don't know. I feel like they could, if they wanted to, trade and get a haul for it. I don't know what you'd get for a haul, but I mean that seems like an option. It doesn't seem like they're going to take a QB at one though. So I don't know. I would like to see them get a vet in there. Maybe take someone like Abdul Carter at one. Sign a vet that could compete, like someone like a Flacco, right? That could compete, and he might be under contract with the Colts, but someone like him that could compete, push Levis. That way you're at least competitive because they do have some skill position players. They do have a decent defense, as we saw. Really, it's going to be the head coach, and maybe can Will Levis at least give you some consistency that we haven't seen these first 2 years. There is a chance he grows. I don't believe in that, but in that case, you could have him and a veteran backup that could at least stabilize. So super, I don't even want to say intriguing, but they are in the case that them having the number one pick, that does open up a lot of options for them. Next team I have on the list, though, it's your squad, New York Giants.
I think the New York Giants will fall. They'll just take best QB available, which is going to be Shedeur Sanders. So that's my hunch, is that they take him at 3. They roll with him. Now, I don't love this.
And you said you like Cam better. If you had the choice, right, you'd want Cam Ward, right?
100%. And actually, I think if there's a chance the Titans trade out of this pick, number 3 is like the perfect place to trade to. Because, like you said, the quote was, if we have the chance to take a generational talent, we're going to do it. That was what the Titans GM had said. So if they trade down to 3, they convince the Giants, hey, we got people calling about this pick. They want to come up and take this QB. You want it? You move up 2 spots. You give us, next year's second, whatever. Then at 3, they can still get their generational talent. If they want Travis Hunter, if they want Abdul Carter, whichever one of them falls to them there, they get their talent. And then they get a haul. Like you said, they could even trade down further if they really wanted to. So in an ideal world, the Giants, either Cam falls to them or they trade up and get him. So that's secondary ideal. First ideal is that they trade for Matthew Stafford. and Cooper Kupp. Bring them
Oh
both
shit.
in. They're saying that the Giants don't want to move off this number 3 pick to get Stafford. That's the deal. But they're also saying that the Giants have openly said that Shador is not their guy. They don't like Shador. They don't think he's going to be the face of a franchise, this and that. Bring in Stafford, sign him to a 3-year deal. They've given Stafford the ability to seek not necessarily a trade, but test free agency and see what other teams are willing to pay him. The Giants have cap space. They can give him the $50 million that he wants. Give him a $140 million deal, $50 million in the first year. Give him a 3-year deal. Bring in Cooper Kupp. Give up this 3rd overall pick. Brian Daboll needs to save his job. He needs to win football games, and they're not going to do it with Shador Sanders, in my opinion. So
Right.
that would be best case scenario. Bring in Matthew Stafford. Second best case scenario is Cam Ward falls, or they move up and take him. Third, which is most likely going to happen, they take Shador at 3. They roll with it.
Interesting. So you know what? It's always, this is one thing I've learned following the NFL and NBA. It's always hard to take what teams are talking about when it comes to the draft, unless it comes from higher up. Again, Titans, was that the owner or was that the GM that said generational talent? Do you know?
Sorry, can you repeat that?
Who said the generational talent quote for the Tennessee Titans? Was that the GM or was that the owner?
That was a GM.
GM?
The GM.
So when you got someone saying something like that, that's pretty concrete. But when it's like sources say anything that's before the week of the draft, I'm always skeptical. That being said, for the Giants, when I'd heard the Stafford rumors, that was super interesting to me because, I mean, the first thing I thought of was what you mentioned. Like, that would definitely save Daboll's job, you know, if they were just able to get, I don't know, 8-9 wins. The other thing it opened up for me was like, wow, Stafford really does think he can play like 2 or 3 more years at a high level at that, which he's reasonable for thinking that because when he's been healthy, he's been as good as anybody, right? But it's been when he's healthy. He looked great, you know, especially that 4th quarter of that Eagles game in the divisional round. The Giants, though, that just seems like a recipe for disaster, really, honestly. Any veteran quarterback staying on the East Coast or staying in these cold weather cities, it just seems like, you know, unless you're really truly built for it, you know, I don't know. Stafford does seem tough enough, though. But, man, the Giants, they just have so much they have to round out. It seems like they'll take someone young, but it also does seem like maybe they'll try for someone that's a veteran quarterback. I know we talked about maybe Sam Darnold. That would be super interesting, him going to the other New York team. They just seem like such a shit show, honestly, and their roster has so many holes. It's like, take your pick. But honestly, I mean, even if it is Shador, right, it could be better. I mean, there's a chance. You just never know that he's really good. I mean, it should be better than Daniel Jones. It'll definitely be better than Tommy DeVito, right? So, yeah, they seem like a wild card to me, even though they're sitting at 3, even though they're sitting at a perfect spot for a QB. But you're right. Daboll's in save your job territory right now, and a rookie QB is not going to do that. So I would not be surprised to see them get ultra aggressive. I have a boring team, and then we're going to end with 2 fun teams to talk about, all right? So we're going to start right now with the New Orleans Saints. Do you think they do anything? Think they just keep Derek Carr? Do you think they get creative? What do you think?
I think they roll with Derek Carr. We had talked about this last year. When Derek Carr was healthy and Chris Olave was healthy, he was actually playing some pretty good football. They were definitely taking the league by storm for the first 2 weeks of the season, and then it all kind of just started falling apart from there. I think part of that is Dennis Allen. So hopefully Kellen Moore coming in kind of fixes some of these things and puts it back together. So I think, honestly, the way that their cap is set up right now, they don't really have an option to go sign anybody. They're going to roll with Derek Carr. And, I mean, they have a good amount of talent on this offensive side where they could probably play. Alvin Kamara's still there. He's obviously aging, but he's there. And then we have Chris Olave. And then I'm blanking on the other wide receiver's name that was blowing up in the beginning of the season there. I can't remember. He went on IR. I got to get you the
Rashid
name.
Shaheed.
Yeah, that's his name. Rashid
And then
Shaheed.
Valdez-Scantling played really well for them down the stretch.
Yep. Definitely had a few weeks there that he was balling out. So I think Kellen Moore coming in is just going to take Derek Carr, play with him. I think it'll be fine. I don't think anybody's betting on this team to win 10 games next year. So if they just finish with 5 or 6 wins, they're fine.
Yeah, I've said it quite a few times, man. Like Derek Carr weirdly played well for them. They functioned well as an offense last year when he was healthy. Kamara most of the year looked like an upper echelon back, honestly. And we just mentioned Valdez Scantling and Rashid Shaheed. They got real explosive plays out of them, right? And Olave obviously got injured, and he was gone for the rest of the season. But if they do have all the pieces, and you can get the defense to perform, and who knows what the hell Kellen Moore looks like as a head coach. But even with their cap hell situation, there's a world where they could get 9 wins or sneak into the playoffs. Like, I know it kind of sounds crazy, and I know Saints fans especially just fucking hate Derek Carr. Like, they hate this guy's guts right now. But I'm telling you, like, if you got this guy at QB, he's better than a lot of the young guys. Like, he can throw it deep. He's not gonna win you a Super Bowl. He's probably not gonna get you to the AFC or NFC championship game. But he will at least possibly get you the playoffs. He will give you a few highlight plays, and he can occasionally ball out. And honestly, aside from the injuries this year, when he was on the field, he was fairly consistent for whatever that's worth. Uh, Last two teams here. Let's go with the Minnesota Vikings. What do you think ends up there happening with their whole QB situation?
I think they're willing to ride with J.J. McCarthy. I think um, the way Sam Darnold ended the season and the comments that Kevin O'Connell made about him kind of really hints at them
Earn the right
saying,
to be a free agent.
yeah, you can go be a free agent now, Sam. Thanks. That's basically what they said. Like, get the hell out. Um, yeah, I think they just roll with J.J. McCarthy. He's going to be healthy. They're going to have a whole training camp with him. I think the way O'Connell has kind of designed this offense, you don't have to be like a 5-star top of your class prospect to work here. You can just be a competent QB who makes the throws that they want you to make, and it's going to work. So I think we're going to roll with J.J. McCarthy here, and they're probably going to have another good season, even though people are going to pick them, probably me, to have a bad season again. But that's what I think.
Yeah, man, I don't know enough about JJ McCarthy. I mean, we probably talked about it last year, but I mean, I know people thought he could be the best QB out of the class, right? Or he's at least the most pro ready, even though he didn't have to throw a lot at Michigan. But people, Michigan fans especially, seem to love him. Um, Vikings fans loved this pick, and nobody expected what we got, not only out of Darnold, but just the Vikings as a team, right? I'm leaning more towards, all right, y'all got 14 wins out of Sam Darnold, right? Like, yeah, the last few weeks didn't go well, but hey, given his age, I know he's late 20s. That was still his very first postseason start. All right. That's A. B, and they were going against the Rams. And I can't remember the play right now, but there was something early in that game that kind of went against them. I think it was a Stafford. It was that Stafford play where they did not. He fumbled the ball, but it was an intentional grounding, but they didn't get the grounding either. So I mean, there was a play in there that could have changed life for the Vikings there. Um,
Would have been a touchdown. Would have been defensive fumble Ruski.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, when you combine that with the fact that, all right, yeah, you take the remaining 10%, yeah, it was awful for Sam Darnold, but 90% of that season, people were talking about the Vikings being a contender, right? Like, people had actual expectations for them once they started winning. They continued to win. They had real wins too. Like, they weren't beating like just scrub teams. They were winning against real teams. Um, I said this a few weeks ago, and I actually saw this uh, somewhere. I saw that they're considering tagging him, and I don't think that would be a bad thing at all. And you've been on here long enough with us to where I've said, hey, if you can have 2 or 3 quarterbacks that could actually compete for the starting job, I'm with that. That's what I want on my team personally. You know what I mean? So if the Vikings could retain Darnold and see what you have in JJ McCarthy, have at it. Have the best of both worlds. I don't see what the benefit is personally of going from 14 wins, competing with the Packers and competing with the Lions, having a chance to win the division against the Lions in week 18, right? And then saying, okay, we're going to roll with, granted, the guy who was supposed to be the starter last year, but a guy we really don't know what we're getting, right? I think we can at least say we're probably not getting 14 wins out of JJ McCarthy. Um, I don't know why you'd roll from a playoff berth to a possible missing the playoff situation next year, right? their roster's great enough to where you don't expect that. Your expectations are still gonna be playoffs, but I don't know. It just seems like a risk. What if he's a fucking bum and you're sitting at 4 wins, and maybe Darnold's not doing great elsewhere, but I mean, you know what he did for you. So that would be my worry with the Vikings. I'm gonna roll with that though. I think they do retain Darnold and they kind of play, you know, see what we got with both, kind of like the Steelers of last year. And then, who knows? Maybe Darnold leaves after the year after that, or maybe he has continued success with them. Um, Here we go, though. The Los Angeles Rams. Do they get rid of Stafford? Do they keep Stafford? Is this all smoke and mirrors? Or is there really drama here? Is there really going to be no Stafford and Cooper Kupp moving forward for the Los Angeles Rams? What do you think?
I think they'll definitely move Cooper Kupp. I think a team is going to be willing, probably the Commanders, somebody's willing to add wide receiver to the wide receiver core. As good as Cooper Kupp is, even if he's not what he was 2 or 3 years ago, somebody's going to want him, and they're probably going to move him. I think Stafford is not going to get traded. They've given him so what the issue is right now is he's saying that he wants an extension and he thinks he's worth $50 million. The team has told him, you can go test free agency, you can go see whatever other team is willing to pay you right now. They're letting the other teams do their job for them, because I bet you quite a few other teams are going to say, nah, you're not worth $50 million, not right now, you're kind of old, you have an injury history, and we're not looking for that. So if enough teams say that, Stafford's coming back to them, and they're going to give him a discount because they're going to take him at 40-something million. So I think that's what's going to happen is enough teams are going to say, no, we're not going to give you 50 even if we traded for you. And then he's going to go back to the Rams. They're going to give him maybe a 2-year deal worth like $70 million or something, and then he's going to play out his contract there. I think that's the most realistic one, but I'm praying he's a New York Giant.
That's the interesting thing here, right? Is that, first of all, he's still under contract with the Los Angeles Rams. So this is a flat out possible trade request. It hasn't been as forthright as Myles Garrett, but like you said, people are doing their due diligence. Sounds like Brady is actively recruiting Stafford, possibly. If there's really smoke there and the Rams are just cool with moving off of them with how young of a team they have that's ready to compete right now. I saw a report either yesterday or the day before that said they're cool with keeping Jimmy Garoppolo and moving forward with him for maybe a year. Funny enough, because he's an actual free agent, he's actually not on their roster right now. And Stafford, like we just mentioned, is definitely on the roster. So that would be very interesting if they just got rid of him, retained Jimmy G. Actually wouldn't mind that for them, given how, yes, they're young, but they're pieces in place for them to succeed with Puka at wide receiver, with Kyron Williams at running back. And again, they're young defense. Like, they just got pieces there. You got McVay. That could be a world where Jimmy G succeeds. He's not going to succeed like he did in Vegas as, the 1A guy, carriest type of guy. But if he's in a situation like San Francisco where he's got guys around him and you really just got to kind of play point guard, all you got to do is facilitate, especially, again, with a guy like McVay, who's an offensive genius and just a great head coach in general, that could be success. What would be the most entertaining move to me, though, if they were to move off of Stafford? And this would sound kind of crazy because Stafford, he's up there in age. But, man, if they got rid of Stafford and made room for Aaron Rodgers, I don't know. If Rodgers is willing to play for cheaper, I'm assuming, what's Rodgers? He's 40, right? He turned 40. Stafford's sitting at 37 right now. So you're getting rid of an old quarterback for an older quarterback, but there's a chance you could get him out a cheaper deal maybe. I don't know what Rodgers is looking for as far as money, but that would be intriguing to me. The Rodgers-McVay combo as far as their offense. I'm sure McVay wouldn't mind him doing the Pat McAfee show. I don't think that would be an issue. So that's an option to me because, yeah, maybe they are cool with Jimmy Garoppolo, but let's be real. This is a team that you thought could go to the Super Bowl. This is a team that many other people going into the playoffs thought was a sleeper team. And I think proved they were a sleeper team with how they did against Philly in the snow. You know what I mean? That's not a recipe at all ever for a West Coast team. And, the Rams were more than tough and more than able to go in there and at least compete. So that would be interesting. And that, to me, would be the two options if you got rid of Stafford. You're not going to go super young. You would obviously keep either Jimmy G who's a veteran guy who can at least, play low cost football. You know what I mean? He's not going to go out there and try to take chances, turn the ball over type of thing. But man, if you really want to make a splash and say, hey, we're still going to try to be contender, we're bringing in a future first ballot Hall of Famer and Aaron Rodgers. He wants to play somewhere warm. That would be wild. That to me would be like the biggest move of the offseason. But who knows? I think it's more likely than anything, though, that they do keep Stafford at the end of the day. It's hard to move an older quarterback, but like you said, teams like the Giants, maybe even the Titans, maybe a team in that position, maybe they trade for a Matt Stafford. That's going to be an interesting domino, though. Once we do know for sure what's going on with Matt Stafford, all these other teams we talk about will fall into place. Tim, any final thoughts on these QBs or maybe even another positional player that's not a QB? Is there anyone that you, and maybe you want to save this for the next episode we're doing, but
I definitely want to save. I got one that I need to save for the next episode, but
Okay.
I will say on the Matthew Stafford talk, if they're able to trade him, like I said, if they're able to package him and maybe Cooper Kupp and get the third overall pick from the Giants somehow, that might be the best GM finessing that's ever happened. They traded away Jared Goff and picks, won a Super Bowl, and then recouped the third overall pick that, like, at the end of his career when he was like on the way out.
That
would be an amazing. It would be exactly brilliant. One of the best trading back and forths that we've probably ever seen, because not many trades are directly linked to a Super Bowl like the Matthew Stafford trade was for the Rams.
I'm going to give you a couple names we didn't talk about, or maybe we didn't talk about them in detail real quick. Purdy, you think there's a chance he does not sign, or do you think they just get it done?
They'll get it done.
I agree. And we talked about this QB, but I did not bring up this possibility. In the event that the Vikings sign Sam Darnold, do you see any world where they try to get a haul for J.J. McCarthy?
No.
Okay.
Nope.
So you think even if they sign Sam Darnold, they just hold on to him? Got you.
Keep them both.
And then this QB, who was, he required much discussion last offseason, but we really did not mention him outside of maybe one time. What do you think happens with Kirk Cousins this offseason?
I think Kirk is likely to just be the backup in Atlanta. I don't think any team is going to be willing to give up picks for him and take on his contract. I know his contract is technically voidable after next year. Like it's super front loaded and not all of it's guaranteed. So, it would be a shot, but I just don't think, from what we saw out of him, I don't think many teams are going to think that that's worth trading for and then paying a bunch of money to. So I think he just stays in Atlanta. I don't know how he'll be being a backup. He's always kind of been the starter. So that might cause some problems, but I think, like you've said, Kirk Cousins, you've always said, get as many valuable backups as you can. Kirk Cousins would be the best backup QB any team could have. I don't think you could name many that are better than him. So
truly, and
that would be an amazing situation for him.
I agree with you. I do wonder. I mean, we've mentioned this a few times. Like Joey mentioned him being traded to the Browns. And I've heard that a couple times now actually being talked about, in a variety of places. That would be like the most like 2006, 2010 Browns thing to do. Like that's just completely on brand, getting the quarterback at the wrong time who has a big name. One thing I am intrigued by, though, if that was a shoulder injury, and I think Kirk Cousins during Super Bowl week alluded to this, that he was injured week 10, week 12, going into that Denver game, whatever. What if, like, his arm's good now? What if he can actually throw a zip? Like, what does that mean? Not necessarily for the Falcons, because it looks like it's Penix going forward, of course, unless he gets injured, which, that's part of his history. But anybody, what if he's actually got his zip back? Yeah, he's older. Yeah, he's still coming off the Achilles, but that's still someone, you'd want for a team, I would think. But thing is, if he's if he's on Atlanta this year, let's say they don't trade him, they don't cut him, anything, we're not going to see him. I can't imagine we really even see him in preseason, so we won't really know what the zip on the ball is going to look like. So interesting situation. I'd be very like I don't know. I could even see him being a guy who's traded in like week 6 of next year. You know what I mean? Matter of fact, when it comes to Aaron Rodgers, what I would do, I wouldn't even partake in this offseason. I would wait a few weeks, keep myself in shape, keep working out, wait until, that time frame, week 6, when people are going to start to get shaky about their starting QBs, when QBs are already going to be injured for the season, and see what opens up for you. You never know what contender could have a guy go down, and then voila, you have a team that you can just sign to off the street. So that would be my advice for one Aaron Rodgers personally. But Tim, I think we timed this perfectly because we got about 5 minutes of a window before Brandon and Keenan come on. So yeah, that was well timed by us. Fun episode. We will be right back. Check us out: TikTok, YouTube, Instagram, Spotify, Apple Music, all that. We will be right back. Enjoy this QB episode. Peace.